The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly in all directions, punctuated only by the distant gleam of stars. But in one small corner of the galaxy, something was about to go very, very wrong. Supreme Commander Vorthak stood on the bridge of his massive warship, the Eternal Conquest, studying the holographic display before him with satisfaction. His 4 arms moved gracefully across the control panels as he examined the data his scouts had collected about their newest target. "A primitive world, my lord," reported his second-in-command, War Captain Zelox. "Our long-range sensors show only basic agricultural settlements scattered across the surface. No unified defense grid, no orbital weapons platforms. Their technology appears to be centuries behind our own." Vorthak's mandibles clicked with amusement. After conquering 4 to 7 civilizations across the galaxy, he had learned to recognize easy prey when he saw it. This blue-green planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star would barely require a fraction of his fleet's power. "How many ships are they fielding?" he asked, though he expected the answer to be laughably small. "Perhaps 20 vessels, my lord. Crude chemical rockets and basic fusion drives. Nothing that could threaten even our oldest cruisers." The Supreme Commander nodded with satisfaction. The Corvani Empire had built its reputation on swift, overwhelming conquest. They would arrive, demand surrender, and when the inevitable resistance came, they would demonstrate why submission was the only logical choice. It had worked on dozens of worlds before. Meanwhile, on the third planet from that unremarkable yellow star, Captain Lee Minho sat in the command center buried 3 kilometers beneath the surface of what appeared to be a simple farming community in rural Korea. The facility's existence was known to perhaps 100 people on the entire planet, and every one of them had spent their lives preparing for this exact moment. "Sir, we're receiving multiple hyperspace signatures at the edge of the solar system," reported Lieutenant Kim Sora from her position at the sensor array. 57 vessels total. They match the configuration we've been tracking for the past 6 months. Minho studied the tactical display with calm eyes. The Corvani ships were exactly where Earth's deep space monitoring network had predicted they would appear. Every move, every formation, every tactical decision had been anticipated by the quantum computers hidden in facilities just like this one across the planet. "Activate Ghost Protocol," he ordered quietly. "All units maintain stealth positions. Let them see exactly what we want them to see." Across Earth's solar system, a carefully orchestrated deception began to unfold. The mining stations orbiting the asteroid belt powered down their military-grade sensor arrays and activated primitive radio transmitters. The massive defense platforms hidden among Saturn's rings went completely dark, their stealth fields rendering them invisible to all but the most sophisticated detection systems. Most importantly, the 3,000 warships of Earth's actual fleet remained cloaked, their crews waiting patiently for the order to reveal themselves. On the lunar surface, Colonel Park Jin-woo watched through his command bunker's observation window as what appeared to be a simple research outpost went about its daily routine. Scientists in environmental suits collected rock samples while maintenance crews performed routine repairs on clearly civilian equipment. None of the Corvani sensors would detect the fusion reactors and weapons systems buried beneath their feet, or the fact that every scientist on the surface was actually a highly trained military officer. The deception had taken decades to perfect. When humanity first detected signs of hostile alien civilizations through their deep space listening posts, they had faced a crucial decision. They could reveal their true technological capabilities and risk being seen as a threat, or they could hide their strength and let potential enemies underestimate them. The choice had been unanimous. Dr. Shin Yuna, working in what appeared to be a simple agricultural research facility outside Seoul, carefully tended to crops that looked perfectly ordinary to any external observer. What those observers couldn't see was that the entire facility was actually a massive underground manufacturing complex, producing the advanced weapons and defensive systems that would soon shock the galaxy. The farmers working the fields above were military engineers, and the grain silos contained missile launchers that could target ships in orbit with pinpoint accuracy. Supreme Commander Vorthak reviewed the tactical assessment one final time before giving the order to advance. His intelligence officers had been thorough in their reconnaissance. The planet showed no signs of advanced military technology, no evidence of a unified spacefaring civilization, and certainly no indication that its inhabitants posed any threat to the mighty Corvani Empire. "Begin the approach," he commanded. "Standard intimidation formation. Once we establish orbit, we'll give them the usual ultimatum." The Corvani fleet began its stately advance toward Earth, 57 ships of varying sizes moving in perfect formation. Their weapons remained powered down, their shields at minimal strength. After all, What possible threat could a handful of primitive humans pose to warriors who had conquered half the galaxy? Captain Lee Minho watched the alien fleets approach on his displays, noting with professional interest how their formation revealed their tactical preferences and probable ship classifications. Every piece of data was being recorded, analyzed, and fed into Earth's strategic planning computers. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Kim Sora, "the enemy fleet will reach orbital insertion point in approximately 4 hours." "Understood," Minho replied calmly. "Signal all units. Operation Sleeping Dragon is now active." Across the solar system, thousands of human military personnel prepared for what would either be humanity's finest hour or its last stand. The aliens approaching their world had no idea what they were really facing, and that ignorance was about to prove very, very costly. The greatest deception in galactic history was about to be revealed. The Corvani fleet emerged from hyperspace in a perfect diamond formation, their dark hulls gleaming against the star field like deadly jewels. Supreme Commander Vorthak stood proudly on his bridge, watching as his ships took their positions around the small blue planet that would soon bow before Corvani might. "Initiate standard first contact protocol," he ordered, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. "Let these primitives see what real power looks like." Across the fleet, weapon systems powered up in a synchronized display designed to inspire terror. Energy cannons that could crack continents began to glow with deadly light. Shield generators hummed to life, creating protective barriers that had never been penetrated by enemy fire. The message was clear: resistance would be futile. On Earth, Captain Lee Minho watched the alien display from his underground command center with professional interest. The Corvani were following their established pattern perfectly, just as human intelligence had predicted. Every ship position, every power reading, every tactical formation matched the data gathered from their previous conquests. "They are broadcasting on multiple frequencies," reported communications specialist Choi Hanna. "Same message they used on the Altrian colonies and the Centauri settlements. They are offering us generous terms of surrender, in exchange for what they call peaceful integration." Minho allowed himself a small smile. The aliens had no idea that human deep space monitoring stations had been intercepting their communications for years. Earth knew exactly how Corvani peaceful integration worked, and it involved anything but peace. "Put me through to the surface fleet," he said calmly. High above, Admiral Kim Do-yoon received the signal aboard what appeared to be Earth's flagship, a modest vessel called the Soul's Pride. To Corvani sensors, it registered as barely more advanced than the primitive spacecraft humans had used centuries earlier. The ship's true capabilities remained hidden beneath layers of holographic camouflage and sensor-dampening fields. "This is Admiral Kim Do-yoon of the Earth Defense Force," he broadcast on the same frequencies the aliens had used. "You have entered our solar system without permission and made hostile gestures toward our world. You have exactly 1 hour to withdraw, or we will consider your presence an act of war." The bridge of the Eternal Conquest fell silent as Vorthak's translation systems processed the human response. Then the Supreme Commander began to laugh, a sound like grinding metal that echoed through the ship's corridors. "Did these creatures just threaten us?" he asked his officers, who shared his amusement. "With what? Those pathetic ships barely register on our sensors." War Captain Zelox consulted his tactical display. "Sir, our scans show approximately 18 human vessels total. Most appear to be converted civilian craft. Their largest ship masses perhaps 1/10 of our smallest frigate." Vorthak's laughter grew louder. In his long career of conquest, he had never encountered such foolish bravado from such obviously inferior opponents. These humans would need a demonstration of Corvani power to understand their position. "Target their flagship," he commanded. "Minimum power settings. We don't want to completely destroy it just yet." The Eternal Conquest's main cannon swiveled toward the Soul's Pride, energy building in its massive firing chamber. Across the human fleet, emergency broadcasts filled the communication channels as panicked voices called for immediate evacuation. The beam lanced across space, a brilliant spear of destruction that struck the human flagship directly amidships. The ship's shields flared briefly, then collapsed under the assault. Hull plating began to buckle and melt as the alien weapon tore through the vessel's defenses. Then something impossible happened. As the Corvani officers watched in stunned silence, the Soul's Pride simply vanished. One moment it was there, burning and dying under their weapons' fire. The next, it had disappeared completely, leaving only empty space where it had been. "Sensor malfunction," suggested Zelox uncertainly. Before Vorthak could respond, his tactical officer called out in alarm. "Sir, massive energy signatures detected throughout the system. Something is happening to the asteroid field." On screens across the Corvani fleet, what had appeared to be simple space rocks began to transform. Rocky surfaces fell away like discarded shells, revealing gleaming metal structures beneath. Weapon ports opened along their hulls as massive battle stations powered up for the first time in decades. Impossible, whispered Vorthak, but the evidence was undeniable. The humans had built military installations throughout their solar system and camouflaged them as natural objects. Then the rest of Earth's deception began to unravel. Behind Earth's moon, space itself seemed to ripple and distort. The handful of human ships the Corvani had detected multiplied into dozens, then hundreds, then thousands as cloaking fields disengaged across the solar system. Sleek warships materialized from nowhere, their hulls displaying technology the aliens couldn't immediately identify. Lieutenant Park Soo-min, monitoring the alien fleet from her position aboard the stealth destroyer Silent Thunder, watched the enemy formation with professional satisfaction. All Ghost Fleet units report ready status, she announced. The Corvani have no idea what they're looking at. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, chaos reigned as sensor operators struggled to make sense of readings that defied everything they thought they knew about human capabilities. Ships that shouldn't exist appeared on their screens. Weapons systems beyond their understanding powered up throughout the solar system. Most terrifying of all, their own sensors detected energy signatures that suggested human technology might actually be superior to their own. Sir, reported the tactical officer, his voice shaking, we're detecting over 3,000 human vessels. Their combined firepower exceeds our own by a factor of 10. Supreme Commander Vorthak stared at the tactical display in growing horror, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. These weren't primitive farmers. These weren't helpless victims waiting for conquest. These were predators, and they had been waiting. The first human weapon to fire was a quantum torpedo launched from what had appeared to be a simple communication satellite. Supreme Commander Vorthak watched in horror as the projectile passed straight through his flagship shields as if they didn't exist, then detonated inside the ship's armor plating with devastating effect. Impossible, he shouted as damage reports flooded in from across his fleet. Nothing can penetrate Corvani shielding technology. But the humans weren't finished. Across the solar system, weapons systems that defied everything the Corvani understood about warfare began to reveal themselves. Nanite clouds erupted from hidden launches, consuming enemy hull armor at the molecular level. Gravity manipulators created crushing forces that twisted starship frames into scrap metal. Most terrifying of all were the human targeting systems, which seemed to predict every Corvani tactical move before it was even made. Captain Lee Minho watched the battle unfold from his command center, noting with professional satisfaction how every enemy response matched the scenarios his tactical computers had modeled. The Corvani are following their standard defensive patterns, he reported to Admiral Kim Do-yoon. Implementing Countermeasure Sequence 7. High above, Do-yoon coordinated the human fleet with calm precision. The Soul's Pride had been nothing more than a holographic projection, designed to make the aliens reveal their weapons capabilities. Now, aboard his real flagship, the New Earth, he watched as human ships moved through the enemy formation like deadly dancers. Target their command vessels first, he ordered. We need to disrupt their coordination before they can adapt. Lieutenant Colonel Nam Ji-hoon led the first boarding action against a disabled Corvani cruiser, his assault team materializing inside the enemy ship through personal teleportation devices that shouldn't have existed according to known physics. The aliens they encountered weren't the savage monsters human propaganda had portrayed, but rather professional soldiers who simply couldn't understand what was happening to them. They are not evil, Ji-hoon reported to his commanders as his team secured the ship's bridge. Just completely unprepared for fighting someone who might actually be stronger than they are. War Captain Zelox found himself facing human boarders who moved through his ship like ghosts, appearing and disappearing at will. When he finally encountered their leader face to face, he was surprised to find a young woman who barely reached his shoulder. How? He asked in broken standard. Your species was classified as primitive. Agricultural. No advanced technology detected. Sergeant Park Yuna smiled as she secured his surrender. That was the point, she said simply. You saw exactly what we wanted you to see. Across the Corvani fleet, similar scenes played out as human forces demonstrated capabilities that shouldn't have existed. Ships that could phase in and out of normal space. Weapons that ignored conventional defenses. Most importantly, tactical coordination that suggested the humans had been studying Corvani fighting methods for years. Supreme Commander Vorthak sat in his command chair like a broken statue, watching his invincible fleet being systematically dismantled by opponents he had dismissed as harmless farmers. When the human shuttle docked with his flagship, he didn't even order his remaining guards to resist. Dr. Shin Yunbai entered the Corvani bridge accompanied by a small diplomatic team, her scientific equipment already analyzing the alien technology around her. What she found in the ship's databases painted a disturbing picture of galactic civilization. "Look at this," she said, projecting the Corvani conquest records for everyone to see. 4 to 7 civilizations destroyed in the past 1,000 years. Each one fell the same way. They revealed their capabilities too early, allowing enemies to develop specific countermeasures. The Ultrian Republic had superior energy weapons, added Captain Kim Do-yoon, studying the data. So you developed adaptive shielding. The Crystal Collective had impenetrable defenses, so you created planet-killer weapons. Every time, you learned their strengths and built counters. Vorthak's translator rendered his response with mechanical precision. We study our enemies. We adapt. We overcome. This is how civilizations survive in the galaxy. But you can't adapt to what you never see coming, replied Dr. Shin. We learned from every species you conquered. Every mistake they made taught us what not to do. Lieutenant Park Soo-min monitored the conversation from her position aboard the command ship, simultaneously coordinating with human intelligence teams across the captured fleet. Sir, we've accessed their navigation databases. The Corvani Empire has detailed records of over 200 star systems, including the locations of dozens of species they are planning to attack next. The scope of the alien empire's predatory expansion sent chills through the human command structure. World after world had fallen to Corvani conquest, their populations enslaved or eliminated entirely. The galaxy was far more dangerous than humanity had realized. There's something else, Dr. Shin reported grimly. According to their records, the Corvani aren't even the worst threat out there. They mentioned something called the Devourer Swarm, and several other empires that make them look peaceful by comparison. Vorthak's mandibles clicked in what might have been bitter laughter. You have revealed your strength to defeat us, he said. Now others will study you as we studied those who came before. They will learn your weaknesses. They will adapt. You have doomed yourselves to the same fate as all the others. Captain Lee Minho exchanged glances with his fellow officers. The alien commander didn't understand the most crucial part of humanity's strategy. They hadn't revealed their full strength at all. The battle had been won using only a fraction of Earth's actual capabilities, leaving the rest hidden for whatever threats might come next. Perhaps, Minho said quietly. Or perhaps we're just getting started. The revelation was complete. Humanity had stepped onto the galactic stage not as victims, but as players in a game they intended to win. Supreme Commander Vorthak sat in his damaged command chair, staring at the holographic displays that showed the complete destruction of his once mighty fleet. Half his ships were gone, reduced to glowing debris by weapons he couldn't understand. The other half lay dead in space, their crews captured by boarding parties that had appeared from nowhere. Captain Kim Do-yoon entered the alien bridge with calm confidence, followed by Dr. Shin Yunbai and Chief Intelligence Officer Major Lee Hyun-woo. The human delegation moved through the Corvani ship as if they owned it, which in many ways, they now did. Your species fascinates me, Vorthak said through his translator, his forearms hanging limp at his sides. Our intelligence networks are the finest in the galaxy. We study every world for cycles before we attack. How did we get everything so wrong about yours? Dr. Shin accessed the alien computer systems with disturbing ease, her fingers dancing across interfaces that should have been completely foreign to human technology. Because we wanted you to get it wrong, she replied. Every piece of information you gathered about Earth was carefully planted by our intelligence services. Major Lee pulled up files from the Corvani databases, displaying them on the ship's main screen. Look at these reconnaissance reports. Your scouts observed our primitive farming communities for months. What they didn't realize was that every farmer they saw was actually a trained military officer. Every barn contained weapons systems. Every grain silo was a missile launcher in disguise. Vorthak's mandibles clicked in confusion. But the energy signatures. The technological readings. Our sensors detected no advanced manufacturing, no military-grade equipment. Because we built everything underground, explained Captain Kim. Those wheat fields in Kansas? There's a Starship factory 3 kilometers beneath them. The fishing villages along our coasts? Submarine bases. Even this conversation is being recorded by sensors hidden in what you think are decorative plants. Dr. Shin projected new images on the screen showing cross-sections of seemingly innocent human settlements. Beneath each one lay vast underground complexes filled with manufacturing facilities, training centers, and weapons stockpiles that dwarfed anything in the Corvani arsenal. We've been preparing for first contact with hostile aliens for over 200 years, she continued. Every major government on our planet contributed to the deception. We built an entire fake civilization on the surface while constructing our real infrastructure where no one could see it. War Captain Zelox, who had been listening in stunned silence, finally found his voice. But why? Why not simply display your strength? Most species would have avoided conflict if they knew you possessed such capabilities. Major Lee exchanged glances with his companions. Because we studied your history. We intercepted your communications, analyzed your conquest patterns, learned from every species you destroyed. Do you know what they all had in common? The alien officers waited in tense silence. They all revealed their true strength too early, Dr. Shin answered. The Altrian Republic demonstrated their energy weapons, so you developed adaptive shields. The Crystal Collective showed off their defensive technology, so you built planet killers. Every single species you conquered made the same mistake, they let you see what they were capable of. We chose a different path, added Captain Kim. We decided to appear weak until the moment came to show our true nature. And that moment was when you fired on what you thought was our flagship. Vorthak studied the human faces around him, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of the trap his empire had walked into. You wanted us to attack. You baited us into revealing our tactics, our weapons, our formations. This entire battle was a test. Not just a test, corrected Major Lee. A demonstration. We needed to prove to ourselves that our strategy would work. You were kind enough to volunteer as our test subjects. Dr. Shin pulled up another set of files, these showing detailed analyses of every Corvani weapon, every tactical maneuver, every technological system their fleet had employed during the battle. In the past 6 hours, we've learned more about your military capabilities than you learned about hours and months of observation. The difference is, we were trying to learn. You were just looking for an easy target. There's something else you need to understand, Captain Kim said, his voice growing serious. The fleet you just faced represents less than 5% of humanity's actual military strength. The weapons we used against you are several generations behind our current technology. What you experienced today was us being careful not to reveal too much. The Corvani officers stared in horror as the implications sank in. If this devastating defeat had been inflicted by humanity's outdated equipment and a tiny fraction of their forces, what could their full military might accomplish? But perhaps most importantly, Dr. Shin continued, you need to understand what kind of species humans really are. We didn't build all this military power to conquer other worlds. We built it to protect ourselves and anyone else who needed protection. She pulled up the final set of files, showing the locations of refugee fleets already heading toward Earth's solar system, drawn by reports of the battle. Word is spreading across the galaxy that someone finally stood up to the Corvani Empire and won. Oppressed species are looking to us for hope. Enslaved worlds are planning rebellions. The balance of power you've maintained through fear is beginning to crumble. Vorthak closed his eyes, finally understanding the truth. Humanity wasn't just another species to be conquered. They were something the galaxy hadn't seen in millennia, a civilization powerful enough to change everything, but wise enough to use that power responsibly. What happens now? He asked quietly. Captain Kim smiled. Now we show the galaxy what humans really are. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Sol, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Captain Kim Do-yoon stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Earth Defense Headquarters, watching as yet another refugee fleet approached through the outer solar system. These were Xantharians, fleeing from what remained of the Corvani Empire's scattered forces. That makes 37 different species we've taken in, reported Commander Park Jin-woo, reviewing the latest immigration reports. The Mars orbital stations are at full capacity, and we're having to build new facilities around Jupiter's moons just to house everyone. Through the vast windows, Earth looked exactly as it always had, blue oceans, white clouds, green continents dotted with what appeared to be simple farming communities. But Kim knew better. Those innocent-looking settlements were still producing the weapons and ships that had shocked the galaxy, their true nature hidden beneath layers of careful deception. Dr. Shin Yunbai entered the command center carrying a stack of data tablets, her face showing the exhaustion of someone who had been working around the clock. The intelligence reports keep coming in, she said, setting the tablets on the central table. 17 different star systems have declared independence from various empires in the past month alone. They're all claiming human protection. Can we protect them all? Asked Major Lee Hyun-woo from his position at the strategic planning console. The question that had been haunting Earth's leadership since their victory over the Corvani. Admiral Choi Minho materialized on the main communication screen from his flagship patrolling the outer system. "We're going to have to try," he said grimly. "Long-range sensors are detecting massive fleet movements across 3 different sectors. The other predator empires are finally taking us seriously." The aftermath of humanity's victory had created ripple effects across the galaxy that no one had fully anticipated. The Corvani Empire had been seen as invincible for over 1,000 years. When news spread that a previously unknown species had defeated their entire expeditionary fleet in a matter of hours, it had shaken the foundations of galactic civilization. Lieutenant Park Sumin looked up from her monitoring station where she had been tracking diplomatic communications from dozens of worlds. "Sir, we're receiving another surrender offer from the Corvani home government. They want to discuss mutual cooperation agreements and are offering to release all their slave worlds in exchange for a peace treaty." Kim considered this carefully. The remnants of the Corvani Empire were still vast, controlling over 200 star systems. A negotiated peace would save millions of lives, but it would also leave the door open for future aggression once they rebuilt their strength. "What's the status of the liberation fleets?" he asked. Commander Park consulted his tactical displays. "The Sol Task Force is 3 days out from the Altrian system. The Busan Squadron should reach the former Crystal Collective territories next week. All proceeding according to schedule." The decision had been made shortly after the battle. Humanity would not simply defend itself. They would actively liberate every world the Corvani had conquered, offering freedom to species that had known only slavery for generations. It was an ambitious plan that stretched Earth's resources to the limit, but the alternative was to let the cycle of oppression continue. Dr. Shin activated the main holographic display, showing a 3-dimensional map of local galactic space. Red zones marked hostile empires, blue showed human-protected territory, and green indicated newly liberated worlds. The green zones were spreading rapidly. "The most interesting development is here," she said, pointing to a cluster of yellow markers near the galactic rim. "These are independent worlds that have formed their own mutual defense pact. They're calling it the Free Worlds Alliance, and they're using modified versions of our defensive strategies." "They're copying our camouflage techniques?" asked Major Lee with interest. "More than that. They're sharing intelligence, coordinating their defenses, and most importantly, they're helping each other instead of competing. It's like they've learned from our example that cooperation is more effective than conquest." A new alert chimed from the communication system. Lieutenant Park checked the incoming message and her face grew serious. "Sirs, we're receiving a distress call from the Outer Rim. Something called the Devourer Swarm has attacked the Kepler colonies. The survivors are requesting immediate assistance." The mood in the command center shifted instantly. The Devourer Swarm had been mentioned in Corvani databases as one of the most dangerous threats in the galaxy, a species that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing but empty space in their wake. Admiral Choi's image leaned forward on the screen. "How long until we can get a fleet there?" 2 weeks minimum," replied Commander Park. "But according to these reports, the swarm moves fast. The Kepler system might not have 2 weeks." Kim made the decision that would define humanity's role in the new galactic order. "Signal the Free Worlds Alliance. Tell them we need a coordinated response. If we're going to be the galaxy's protectors, we can't do it alone." Within hours, the largest fleet in galactic history began to assemble, human ships working alongside vessels from dozens of recently liberated worlds, all united by a common purpose. The Devourer Swarm would soon discover what the Corvani had learned it too late: humanity wasn't just another species to be underestimated. As Captain Kim watched the fleet depart for the Outer Rim, he reflected on how much had changed. Earth had revealed itself not as conquerors, but as guardians. The galaxy finally had hope. And the predators were learning to be afraid.